Hi, my name is Catherine Hartley, and I'm here to talk about how to revise for English. Broadly, I'd like to just tell you briefly about what students should be revising, what successful English revision looks like, and how students and parents can know that their revision is working. Everything that I'm going to talk about is going to be broadly connected to or taken from the Fitzharris School English Department revision website, which you will find by going via the Fitzharris School website, as Mr. Byford will have directed you at the start of this presentation. The first thing I'd like to draw your attention to is the details that are on the front page of the English revision website, where you can see that there are 4 English papers and you can see the timings for each one and the content of each. And the reason I draw your attention to that is because students have in total 7.5 hours worth of English exams at the end of their course. And consequently, it's really important that they are spending sufficient time revising for those long exams. There's a lot of content to learn, and it would be inefficient and unwise for students to be spending less time revising than they will ultimately spend in the exams. All of which is a roundabout way of saying that they cannot just revise for English the night before. They need to be deploying long-term strategies, little and often, to make sure that they have covered enough of the content and spent sufficient time. So the first thing that students should be revising is the text. And one of the ways that we're supporting students to do this is by producing knowledge organisers. Now, all students have physical copies of these, but just in case they've gone missing or you haven't seen them, you'll also find them on the website under the knowledge organisers tab. And what you'll find is that for each of the texts that we study, we've produced a 1-page document that has all of the fundamental details that students need to know. And fundamentally, we believe that if students know everything that's on that front page, they'll be absolutely fine. On the reverse, there's advice about how to revise. And on the left-hand side, there's the basics. So how do students know that they can be learning about plot and characters and themes? And then on the right-hand side, we've got more ambitious strategies about vocabulary, more impressive context, more impressive concepts. So the first thing students need to know are their texts. Once they have done those things, they should also be spending time quizzing themselves using Educake. So you'll have heard from me about Educake no doubt already, but ultimately we think that students should be spending about 10 minutes a day doing Educake quizzes. In the orange, when they log in, they'll see the quizzes that they've been set by me. And then they've also got a blue button called Revision Wizard, which directs them to their own sort of self-directed revision. So the algorithm will produce for them questions on topics that they're weaker on, or they can choose for themselves topics that they really want to practice. And once they know their texts well, the next thing that they need to be doing is applying them to tasks. So one of the things that is difficult about the English exams is that students have to do quite a lot. So although I've said that the exams are long, and that is true, they also go very quickly, and students have to be producing lots of different types of answers in those exams. So we want that to feel automatic for our young people. We want them to go in knowing exactly what the mark schemes are going to look like and exactly the strategies that they need to apply to each task, so that all they need to think about is how to come up with really great ideas rather than thinking, well, how do I answer this question? So the reverse side of the knowledge organisers has good advice for those, as do our English language knowledge organisers, which have sentence starters for each of the types of questions. So in the grey boxes that you can see on the screen here, but on the knowledge organisers themselves, you'll see basic sentence starters and then more advanced sentence starters. And when students have kind of got the measure of those things, they should then start applying their knowledge to practice papers. So one of the best things that they can be doing is sitting down with practice papers and planning their answers, or having a go at writing in timed conditions. So what does successful English revision look like? I've sort of touched on this already, but essentially it breaks down into 2 categories. Students need to be learning things, and then they need to be practicing applying that learning. So the backs of the knowledge organisers have lots of advice about how to go about learning. So there's a whole strategies box here, which I'll just try and blow up for you here. So for example, one of the strategies that we really encourage students to deploy is mind mapping. So they would put the name of a character, say, or a theme in the centre of a mind map, and then they would write down everything that they could think of, all of their quotations, all of the key moments, any kind of related context based on that character or that theme. And one of the things that that will show is whether they have good knowledge already, in which case they don't need to continue revising that character, they can focus on something else, or whether there are gaps, in which case they maybe need to go back to their source materials, they need to go back to their exercise books, they need to go to the useful links, they need to go to the knowledge organizer so that they can plug those gaps. So mind mapping is one way, and another really important strategy is using flashcards. So we suggest that students create flashcards, particularly with quotations on. The quotation will be on one side, and then on the other side will be a clue. So for example, if the quotation was, "It is the east and Juliet is the sun," students would write that quotation on one side, then they'd maybe draw a picture of the sun on the other. And then when they were testing themselves, they would look at the clue side, they'd see the sun, they'd try and say the quotation out loud. If they got it right, they'd put it in one pile. If they got it wrong, they'd go and put it in another pile. And then the second time through, they'd test themselves on all of the ones that they got wrong until eventually all of them move into the correct pile. So mind mapping, flashcards, and then finally practice papers. So as I've said, writing full answers or planning, both really useful strategies. The same is true for English language. So learning those sentence starters, particularly using flashcards and giving clues, testing themselves, and then applying their knowledge to practice papers. All of those things are available on the revision website. There are links to practice papers on there. And if they run out, they can ask their teacher. And how can you know that that revision is working? Well, the first thing you can do is talk to your child about what they've been learning, ask them questions about their texts, ask them questions about what's coming up in the mocks, ask them about do they know what to do for, let's say, question 3 on the language paper. It's not your job to know those things, but it's their job to be able to explain. So asking them how it's going with quite specific questions could be really useful. They'll also know it's working if they're gradually moving their flashcards from the wrong pile into the right pile. So repeatedly testing themselves and finding that they're getting more correct is a really good way of knowing that the knowledge is sticking. Similarly, how quickly or how thoroughly can you produce a mind map about, let's say, Tybalt in Romeo and Juliet or Roger in Lord of the Flies is a really good test to see whether your quotation knowledge or your text knowledge can apply to different kinds of foci. And so how successfully can I create a mind map is a good test to see how much you know. It's called a brain dump. That can be really useful. How easily, how confidently can I tackle a practice paper? When I sit down in front of a question, do I know what it's asking me and do I know how to approach it? And then once I've written a practice paper, giving it to a teacher for feedback. So we're always happy to mark anything that students show us and give them feedback on what they're producing. So having a look at completing a practice paper and then handing it in for some response from a teacher is a great way of knowing whether the revision is working. And then finally, you should be able to track and monitor whether your child is keeping up to date with homework. All of our homework is revision via ePraise. So seeing what's being set, are they completing their Educate? Are they keeping up to date with their homework booklets? All of which are really useful ways of knowing that that revision is working and that students are working smart. It's possible to look very busy while you're revising, but what we actually want students to be doing is doing things that are genuinely effective and proven to be useful. Most importantly, if you've got any questions, if you have any comments or any feedback about any aspect of your child's learning in English, this is my email address and I will do my very best to help you. Thank you very much.